Hi everyone, welcome to the last section on Chapter 10, Monopoly. And on this section, we expand a little bit more on government control of monopoly that we looked at in the last segment. And we focus on price setting, where the government actually sets the price that the monopoly can charge, and also there's a certain quantity that falls out from that as well. So large monopolies are often regulated by commissions, they're called, and there's the CRTC, the Canadian Radio Television Commission, the Ontario Hydro Commission on hydroelectricity in Quebec, and Ontario, and the Canadian Transport Commission. They all have power to approve price changes. So there's two major prices we want to look at and explain what they are and what we're trying to do. And I mentioned before in segments that perfect competition is often regarded as the best, the fairest, the most ideal solution, because you end up in the long run at your lowest average total cost. So it's a good use of resources. You also end up where price equals marginal cost. So that's sort of socially optimal. And let's just re-explain these in a little bit more detail here and refresh our minds on them. The socially optimal price that we're going to refer to, this one right here, the first one that we're talking about, the socially optimal price, well, it's a price that produces the best allocation of products and therefore the best use of resources from society's point of view. So we summarize all that by simply saying that's where price equals marginal cost. And notice that that's the perfect competition solution. We always go where price equals marginal cost. It's where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, of course. That's the profit maximizing world. But turns out that price equals marginal cost as well. So the way we look at this, we say the price is what society's willingness to pay is for the quantity of that product. And it's therefore the value that society places on that product. And the marginal cost is the value of the last resources used, the incremental resources used to build the last unit of that product. So when those two things are equal, that's kind of a nice, healthy society balance, where the value that people put on it as expressed by the price they're willing to pay just matches the incremental cost of the resources used, or the incremental value to society of those resources used in producing that product. So that's a socially optimal price. Monopolists do not produce where price equals marginal cost. So we're going to look at a way the government can tell them to and see how that looks. The other price we want to talk about that the government sometimes look at is something called the fair return price. And that's a price where that basically guarantees the firm is just going to earn zero economic profit. So that means it's earning normal profits. It's covering its opportunity costs, a rate of returns built into that. So it's guaranteeing its normal profits. And of course, that means break even. So we've looked at break even prices before. We said that's where average revenue equals average cost. Well, average revenue is price. So we just want to find where price equals average cost. So for both of these types of prices we're going to talk about, we've seen them before. They're just called something slightly different. Fair return price, well, that's just a break-even price where price equals average cost. Socially optimum price, well, that's just the solution in perfect competition that we've seen many times. That's where price equals marginal cost. So let's go a step further and take a look at the graph and see if we can pick these out and compare them to what the unregulated monopoly would charge and see how they're different. So let's trace out what we're trying to show here. First, we'll put and show that we've got our normal demand curve. I just want to trace these in dark red so they're easier to focus on because there's a fair bit on here. Got our normal demand curve right there. And of course, we also have a marginal revenue curve because this is a monopolist. And then we have our marginal cost curve and our average cost curve. Now, I won't trace those out. And where is the monopolist, the unregulated monopoly? So UM stands for unregulated monopoly. Well, that's just where the monopolist is free to do whatever they want. So they find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. They're profit maximizers. Same old rule, where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, That's the quantity they produce, the unregulated monopoly quantity. How do we find the price that they want to charge? Comes off the price line. The demand curve is showing us the price. So I have to remember to go up to the price curve or the demand curve and come across, and that's the price that the unregulated monopolist would charge. So it's at a pretty low quantity and a pretty high price. That's what the government wants to sort out and force them to do something a little more close to perfect competition, or at least a more better solution for society. So the first one we look at is the socially optimal quantity and price. So that's the one where we defined on the previous page that marginal cost equals marginal revenue. It's where the price equals marginal cost. The willingness to pay for that last product just equals what it costs to make it. So that's what we call socially optimal, where marginal cost equals price. That's our perfect competition solution. We just find the marginal cost curve and the price or price line, demand curve, and that's where they cross. So this is the socially optimal quantity, and of course we come across to see what is the socially optimal price that the government would be telling the monopolist to charge. So we can find the socially optimal price and quantity. And then the last solution we have, the government may say, okay, you know what? Let's just adopt this fair return price. So we're going to force you to charge a price that just provides a fair return to you, right? You're going to break even, but you're making normal economic profits. So fair return, that's where the price is actually the average cost. So price equals average cost there, right? We're just breaking even. We're earning a fair return. So once again, I find where the price line or the demand curve just crosses the average cost, and that's right there. The quantity that would be produced, QFR or quantity fair return, is right there. And we go off the demand curve to come across and find the price fair return. So in these situations, the first one, well, we just find where MR equals MC. That's how the monopolist or any unregulated company would want to work. That's the quantity they'll produce. To find the socially optimal quantity, that's where we have to find where the price equals the marginal cost for reasons we've already discussed. And then to find the fair return quantity, we find where the price just equals the average cost or average total cost, because that's where the firm is just breaking even. So I'll clear this and take us over to the next slide where they give us an example. So it says on the graph, indicate where price unregulated monopoly and quantity unregulated monopoly is. We know what we do. We just find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost right there. Find the quantity that we're going to produce, QUM, go up to the demand curve and find the price we're going to produce. And then we do the same thing for socially optimal. That's where price equals marginal cost. So we find price off this demand curve. There's our marginal cost. They intersect there. So there's our socially optimal quantity and socially optimal price. And the last one, we want to find the fair return. Well, that's where we find price equals average cost, and the price comes off the demand curve. So we hit the average cost right there. That's the quantity fair return. And if we come across, we see the price fair return is right here. Yeah, they just missed it a little bit, but you know where it is. So look at the previous one if you want to go through it manually with me as I trace it out in different colors. But here's the overall solution to it. So that's it for this chapter in Monopoly. This is a nice tight little summary. Monopoly was a bit longer of a chapter. We had lots of small segments to look at, but remember, monopolies occur because there are barriers to entry. Know what those are, how monopolist maximizes profits, just like anybody else, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. There's good things and bad things about monopolies. And let's compare monopoly to perfect competition solutions. And then, of course, how can government control monopolies, which we just did and finished up in this segment here. After this, we're going to go on to something called imperfect competition, chapter 11. And in that chapter, we'll look at monopolistic competition an oligopoly, and we'll see you when we get there.